It's 3 p.m. and this is the regular scheduled meeting of the November Planning Commission. Today we will be using one lectern over there, so both city staff and anybody else that's going to come up and speak will be using the one to my left, your right. So it's my pleasure to introduce a new member to the Planning Commission today, Art Rosenberg. And Art, just say a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm glad to be here first. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to serve Planning Commission. My name's Art Rosenberg. I live in Woodhaven, South Fargo, and I do real estate development and business brokering, and I'm looking forward to serving. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, first I'd like to approve the order of agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes of the meeting of October 3rd? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of October 3rd.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any corrections? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. I see we still have a brown bag listed for November 20th. Is there any more thoughts on that?
No, I think at this thoughts, staff are going to suggest that we cancel it for, I don't want to say for lack of items, but we're kind of short-winded, if you will, for engaging
With
activities.
two consulting staffs here?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So no brown bag this month. Okay, first off, we're going to have a short presentation by the Land Development Code Diagnostic Group that was brought in. And Lisa, are you going to? Oh, Aaron's going to start it off. Okay. I keep looking over here to this lectern.
Yeah, so a little bit different today, but good afternoon. And I'm really just here to introduce Leasewise Consulting and her team. Catherine is walking up now. She's the project manager for this project, and she'll be giving you a brief overview of the project, where it sits today and where we're going from here. As many of you will recall, I think we last talked about this with the Planning Commission at the September brown bag meeting, just to provide a kind of a broad refresher overview. Really the purpose of this study is really to get an understanding for what the strengths and the weaknesses are of the current land development code, figure out, assess where those stand, and then assess some options for how to make any necessary improvements. So I think I'll leave it at that, and I'll let Catherine introduce her and her team, and staff will also be here for any questions at the end of this. And yeah, so Catherine, I'll hand it off to you, and then can we switch the screen over to what I have on my computer here somehow?
Are you guys seeing it on your, do you have personal screens or no?
See what?
We're just going to switch computers here quick, I think.
Aaron, do you want to tell everybody about some of the meetings that are coming up in the meantime?
Yeah. So LWC and team is here today and tomorrow. This is kind of their kickoff to the public input portion of this project. And so this is their first stop is with the Planning Commission here today to introduce the project to you all and hear some feedback from you guys. And then tonight, this evening, you should have all received an email as well regarding an public open house. That'll take place from 5 o'clock to 6:30 tonight. That'll be held at the Cass County Public Health Building in the Oak Room, which is just the main meeting space in that building. Building is located at the corner of 25th Street South and 13th Avenue South in the northeast corner there. And so the public is welcome to attend that meeting to learn about this project and to also provide any feedback or comments or thoughts that they have related to the Land Development Code. And so maybe with that, it looks like we've got things up and running. So, well, I'll continue. And then tomorrow, the consultant team will be hosting a number of one-on-one interviews with various stakeholders, whether it's neighborhood representatives from neighborhood associations, the development community, planning commissioners, our chair and vice chair of the Planning Commission, and others. So with that, I will now hand it off to Catherine.
All right, good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for your patience while we resolve some technical difficulties here. So I'm Catherine Slama. I am a senior associate at Lisa Wise Consulting, and I'm the project manager for this project. Also with me today is Lisa Wise, president of Lisa Wise Consulting, and Scott Armstead from SRF Consulting. We make up the consulting team for this project. And we are really excited to be here today. We really wanted to just take this opportunity, as Aaron mentioned, to introduce ourselves and introduce the project a little bit further to the commission, and begin the conversation about what is working and what is not working with the development regulations here in Fargo. Our agenda is pretty brief. We're going to do a project overview. We'll talk about some of the opportunities for public input, and then we'll open it up to the commission to have a discussion. So first and foremost, what is the Land Development Code? The Land Development Code, or the LDC, is the set of regulations in the city that dictates all aspects of new development and redevelopment in Fargo. It's located in Title 20 of the City of Fargo Municipal Code, and it covers zoning, land use, subdivision, signs, as well as all zoning permitting and approval procedures. The LDC hasn't been updated since 1998, although the city has undergone a significant amount of change in that same period of time, including rapid population growth, as well as the adoption of several important policy plans, including the 2012 Comprehensive Plan and the 2017 Downtown in Focus Plan. These planning documents, specifically the 2012 Comprehensive Plan, establish a vision for how the city of Fargo is going to grow and change over the next several years. It covers a variety of topics: environmental sustainability, flooding, public health and safety, economic growth, transportation, and most important for this project, it provides vision, goals, and initiatives related to neighborhood and commercial development. So the initiatives you see here are just a sampling of those that are really relevant in providing our team guidance and the city guidance on issues related to development in Fargo. And because the comprehensive plan dictates because the LDC dictates what can and can't be built in Fargo and then where, it's one of the many important tools that the city has in order to implement the vision of the comprehensive plan. And because the Land Development Code was written 15 years before the comprehensive plan was adopted, it's pretty likely that there's going to be some inconsistencies between these two documents, and that the Land Development Code as it currently exists probably doesn't have the right types of tools in place to properly implement the vision and the new policies of the comprehensive plan. So this is where the project comes into play. The LDC diagnostic project is really a two-part project. First, in order for the city to understand what it needs to fix, you need to know what isn't working. So that's the Land Development Code Diagnostic Report. The LWC team will be performing a technical analysis of the Land Development Code as it exists today. We'll be diagnosing issues and problems that may limit and impede the ability of the LDC to effectively implement the comprehensive plan, as well as looking at a few other factors that I'll mention in just a second. And we'll present that report to the Planning Commission for consideration and discussion. And next, after that, the LWC team will be working with the city to develop a preferred alternative and how to move forward. Really what we're looking for here is helping the city figure out the best way to modify or potentially modify the Land Development Code to address any of the issues we've identified in the diagnostic report. We'll weigh pros and cons about various different approaches, because there's a lot of ways to undertake these types of improvements. There's not just one strategy, there's not just one method, and there's pros and cons to each, and we'll kind of work through that as a community with the city staff and the commission, both Planning Commission and the City Commission. And we'll figure out a path forward that meets the city's needs and goals. So elements of the analysis. So these are the things that we're going to be looking at as our team undertakes the diagnostic report. So the comprehensive plan consistency is one part of the analysis. And for that, we also have, as part of our team, SRF Consulting. They're a local firm here. They have office in Fargo as well as an office in Bismarck as well. And they were part of the team that helped write the comprehensive plan back in 2012. So they have some additional insider perspective on the comprehensive plan. In addition to that, we'll also be comparing Fargo's LDC to industry best practices. We'll be assessing the effectiveness and simplicity of the development review process. We'll be considering how easy it is for staff and the public to use the LDC in terms of user friendliness. And we'll also be making sure that the LDC complies with all required state and federal laws. As a tertiary component of this analysis, we'll also be providing some insight as to how the LDC relates to the city's costs and revenue from an economic and fiscal perspective. So here we are in the process. You can see on this timeline, we are at the very beginning. It's really an opportunity for our team to listen to the commission, to listen to the Fargo residents, to listen to members of the community who work and live and do business in Fargo and use the LDC on a regular or semi-regular basis. Throughout the winter, we will be really delving into the technical analysis and presenting that to the commissions for input. And then into the spring, we'll be working towards a preferred plan. So in addition to performing and reporting on the analysis, community outreach is a big component of this project as well. The project work plan builds in education and outreach to ensure that the process is transparent and that the community understands what is going on with the Land Development Code. One way to do this is hosting a series of stakeholder interviews. Our team will be speaking with some stakeholders that have some firsthand experience using the development code. This provides a unique perspective that we're, as those who do not develop in the city of Fargo, a perspective that we are unable to gather just from reading the code itself. And then we also have planned for one community workshop. The community workshop is actually this evening following the Planning Commission meeting. It's at 5 o'clock tonight, as Erin said, at the Fargo Cass Public Health Building. And this workshop is open to anybody who wants to attend, any Fargo resident, business owner, or anyone who's interested in what's going on with the Development Code project. And then last but not least, the city will be hosting 4 work sessions, including this one, with the Planning Commission and or the City Commission. These work sessions are opportunities for the team to present findings, discuss alternatives, and discuss next steps for the project. There'll be 4 of these throughout the project. So what's next? I think you kind of got a little bit of this already with Erin, but tonight, we encourage everyone to come and attend the workshop at 5 o'clock tonight. Tomorrow, we will be hosting a full day of stakeholder interviews. We have a pretty packed schedule for tomorrow. Through the winter, we'll be working through the technical analysis, and then next spring, we'll be working on alternatives and recommendations. So next, so these are some questions that we have for the commission. These are the same questions that were available in the Planning Commission packet ahead of time. And I can open it up to the chair to decide if you want to go, we can go through the questions one by one. We can go commissioner, give each commissioner an opportunity to speak, or we can run the discussion a little bit more fluidly, whatever suits the commission and what you prefer.
Like fluidly would be fine.
Okay, I'm gonna take a seat with the rest of my team, but we can go through some of these questions.
Okay. So do you want me to ask these questions up here to our group?
So, these are all questions that our team thinks are great opportunities to be more thought-provoking and start a dialogue and a conversation about the development code from your individual perspectives. So you can answer one of these or none of these. What we're really interested is from those of you who have been on the commission for a while or who are new, what your experience is in using the land development code, because you see a lot of projects come forward. So we're interested in how the process is working from your perspective as a commission. We're interested in hearing your thoughts about what's really working well in terms of development in Fargo, or maybe some of your concerns about the types of projects that are coming in, or some of the challenges you may have faced when going through the entitlement and approval process.
Well, being one of the older members of the of the Planning Commission, I think whenever we have a consultant come in, my primary goal would be to make the steps clearer for whether it's a developer or whoever's coming before us. I think the clearer definition they have of what they can do or can't do probably makes our steps a lot easier up here. I think when we have a gray area is when we tend to get in more public discussion on what can or can't be done.
I guess I'll add a little bit to that because I think the chair's goals are right. If we have a perfect land development code, our jobs are fairly easy. But I guess I would take that. I think there's always going to be, or you hope to have developers in your city that want to be creative and want to try something new and different. And you almost can't plan for all that. And so I guess I would really like a land development code that sets up a process or procedure for those variations we know we're going to get. So we know there's going to be unique situations. And the biggest struggle I think we have as a commission and the public has trying to be involved in the processes when we have those variations, and it gets to be sort of off book and you have to come to a lot of meetings, and it's just uncomfortable for everybody. So if we have a process to how to handle those, I think that would be a top goal.
One of the things that seems to have been prevalent is that there have been established codes and ways of doing things, but then it seems like, as Rocky was saying, that we should have the ability to have exceptions, but we also don't want to fail those who are dependent upon them for their own plans, for instance, the neighborhoods. There have been a lot of problems in particularly the Roosevelt neighborhood that has had to do with failure of the process. So if there's some way that could be clarified for all involved, including the planning department, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. I would echo those comments. That's probably the biggest frustration or challenge that this group sees. But if there was a vision that we could all get behind, rather than individual commissioners' opinions or personalities, or when it comes with a recommendation from us and then it goes to the city commission, and the vote gets reversed, you know, how are we being guided? And, you know, what is our guiding light for these different, not only new developments, but for, you know, rehabbing the older neighborhoods? And I know people don't like change. Change can be good, but not always. So, you know, what can residents reasonably expect when they buy a home, whether it's in a new development or in an older development? What kind of guarantees do they have that there's not going to be a gas station across the street just because somebody decides one night it'd be convenient to have one?
Any other comments, commissioners?
I know we're talking tomorrow as well, so I'll try not to jump ahead of myself, but I think we have one issue tonight that calls that into question, and we have a zoning, a downtown mixed-use zoning, which you can generally do whatever you want almost as far as zoning goes. And then as we have an expanding downtown, we're up against a lot of neighborhoods that have, you know, much stricter zoning. And so we get all these situations where you have sort of ad hoc zoning in sort of the fringe area of downtown, and as it expands, it's just going to create, you know, exponential more problems. And so we're trying to figure out how to do that in a manageable way, and I don't think we have a code that is all that prescriptive of how to do that. So.
Anyone else? All right, we kind of have answered a couple of the questions. What is effective in the existing LDC code? Is there anything that that's kind of a loaded one because we don't have the whole thing in front of us, but
Chair, if I may, I mean, I might interject and say, you know, it may be difficult to sometimes think about what is working, but sometimes if you can think of a process that went well, or a project that went well, or compatibility standards that worked well, or exceptions that worked well, or a process that worked well, that could be helpful, or it can be the vice versa. You know, what have you been struggling with? I do think you addressed a lot of this, you know, with through the primary goal question that everyone went through. That's just another way to think about it. Projects that work, that you think really fit well in Fargo, or don't fit well.
we tend to probably have a little bit better luck in the areas that are more in the commercial realm of things, where there have been probably the newer areas that have been zoned, and we don't seem to have quite as many problems. Maybe some CUPs and some PUDs maybe once in a while, but not as much issues in those areas. I think the biggest issue, I think, a lot of times is where we have projects bordering residential areas. And I think between this LDC study and the core neighborhood study that we're having done too, hopefully we'll try to find a path to compatibility there. So, Mary, did you?
I would just add that it seems like there's a lot of developer-driven planning that it seems to go on that perhaps isn't compatible with best practices. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. But one of the things, even in Go 2030, there was a lot of conversation in there about walkability, and when I drive around this community, and I'm driving because it's not very walkable. Downtown Fargo is walkable, and that was done 100 years ago, but the new stuff isn't. I mean, and I know there's walking paths everywhere, but I mean, the traffic is just horrendous, and it doesn't feel good. I'm not a planner. I don't know how you create that, but there surely must be ways to incorporate it better than I think we've done.
Anyone else? All right. Okay, you're all looking at the questions, the rest of the questions. Anybody got any comments on the rest of the questions on this?
I think one of the issues that comes up a little bit when we have citizens, come and voice their opinions about things, there does seem to be some areas that are a little bit subjective. When a question comes up about, does this affect property values or things like that? So I think those areas that seem to be a little open to interpretation, or some things, I think need a little subjectivity removed for everyone.
Good question.
Well, I would just echo that a little more clarification on those criteria would be helpful, guiding our decisions. And I think some of the challenges we've had is hearing from citizens, from members of the public, either for or against a project, and then later some clarification comes that the issue isn't even necessarily a part of the land development code, or it's not even a factor in the decision at all anyway, so that can be a little bit confusing. So maybe some clarification, maybe on the part of the public. I think that could be addressed under the usability or the user-friendliness aspect of the LDC.
Anyone else?
I think one of the things that I kind of struggle with is apartment buildings. So we have been looked at of increasing density in apartment buildings, but I don't see data. You can hear what the data is, and if you're listening to City Commission, but to really have that data to see, in the local area, all of Fargo, what does the apartment occupancy look like, for us to make decisions.
Anyone else? Scott, you've been silent over there.
I'm a pretty quiet person.
So are we on a certain number, or are we?
No, I just lumped the rest together just to.
Okay. I'd like to say something about number 4, the physical development standards for appropriate development. It seems, in just observing, driving around town, there's a lot of inappropriate scale in particular. Even in areas that are supposed to have zoning that has commentary or guidelines, it seems like those are often ignored, and people go ahead with projects without being challenged in any way as to what their plan is. It seems it's a big problem. So I think, okay. So that physical development standards, I think those are very significant.
And sorry, Chair, I did want to just point out also that if you need more time to really think about this and dwell on these questions a little bit more, please feel free to sit down and write down your thoughts and submit the responses to staff, and they'll share that with the consulting team. So you don't have to feel pressured that if you don't think of something right now this afternoon, that this is the last opportunity. I do want to make sure that that's clear as well.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone?
I think you've kind of touched on the key things where we do have controversies, where we've got competing interests for that land. Around the NDSU areas, in the Roosevelt area, has always been a contentious, and yet, there's an inevitability in certain parts of that you're going to have some transition. And how do we handle that in those fringe areas? We also were in a situation where, as we develop toward the future, we're probably going to have flood protection around here, and it's going to hem in the city. And how do we calculate that into our future plans in terms of how dense or sparse our population is within those areas, and are we making the best use of the available resource that we have in the long term?
I think Scott touched on, and Rocky started to touch on it, the transition areas seem to be the areas that seem to bring the most discussion between the public, the planning office, and the commission. So I think any of those areas that we can see some clarification in or guidelines would be very helpful, so. Brad?
I think one last thing, and I don't know if this is a code thing or if it's really just administrative and procedural, but since I've been on the commission, it always feels to me like the process is working, that the public does have a chance to be heard, and I think the staff does a nice job of working with both parties and trying to work things out. So again, I don't know if that's a code issue as much as a compliment to the staff, and I just always feel like citizens, whether they may not always like the result, I always feel like they've been heard.
Great. Anything else, Catherine?
I just wanted to, Lisa Wise, I just wanted to say that we are coordinating with the core neighborhood effort. We know that's a really important community effort going on right now, and we're working together as a team. And then I also just wanted to say that one of the major things we do is balance predictability and flexibility. I think we're hearing a lot of that from the commission this afternoon, as things need to be predictable in terms of what the outcome is or are. And we can work on regulation to do that for the standards and the process, even if the process is working, just making sure it's clear, step by step, but also building in some flexibility to deal with those unique kind of one-off situations. Cities are messy places, no code is perfect, and we need to be nimble enough to kind of address those situations. It's not easy kind of balancing those, but it's something I think working together, we can try to develop solutions for. Which is one good thing about this process, sort of taking it step by step, going through the diagnostic and then the alternatives and then the preferred recommendations for moving forward, I think gives you and the community a lot of input on what those next steps would be and how this shapes up. So, thanks.
Well, thank you. I think we all look forward to some further discussions, and we look forward to hearing what the final results are. So thank you for joining us today. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Moving into the public hearing items. Item number 1 has been withdrawn, and we'll move on to item number 2. We're continuing the hearing on the application requesting a zoning change from DMU downtown mix to conditional overlay to the DMU downtown mixed use. Kylie.
Good afternoon. So if you just bear with us, I think we're going to try to get
Switch computers.
the PowerPoint pulled up real quick. And now I might have broke it.
Might have broken it.
It's on dual screen, so it's, the settings are off, and I was trying to drag it over. I don't know.
I just need this one. Should be this one below. It's just the 11.
Perfect. Now that we got it, I'll go ahead and
All right,
start.
we'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Item number 2, titled Harwood's Edition, was presented to your Commission at the October 1st Planning Commission meeting. Your Commission voted to continue the application in order to allow the applicant additional time to coordinate parking with the surrounding businesses. The applicant, Chris Hawley, has had additional conversations with the Family Fair and can speak further to those discussions. The applicant is requesting a zone change from DMU downtown mixed use with a conditional overlay to DMU downtown mixed use. This zone change request is to remove the conditional overlay in its entirety. The conditional overlay was established in 2017 when the subject property was rezoned to DMU. The conditional overlay restricts building height, building and parking lot setbacks, as well as additional parking lot screening. At this time in 2017, staff felt that a conditional overlay was needed to add protection to the neighborhood. In retrospect, staff feels that the conditional overlay mirrors the residential protection standards, which is in section 20-0704 in the Land Development Code. Due to the proposed commercial use being within 150 feet of a residentially zoned property, residential protection standards that are outlined in the LDC do apply. During the site plan review, the applicant applied and was subsequently approved for a residential protection standards waiver to reduce the building and parking lot setbacks. The approved setback reductions are consistent with the site plans shown on your screen. Staff is recommending approval of the conditional overlay due to the fact that the residential protection standards apply for the property. The conditions for the residential protection standards that were approved for this property restrict the height of the building to 35 feet, as well as a 5-foot setback from the northern property line with an additional 6-foot fence for the parking lot to the adjacent properties to the north. Once again, staff is recommending approval of this application. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions for Kylie? All right. I invite the applicant to speak.
Hi, and thanks for having me again. My name is Chris Hawley, and I'm the architect and project manager on this project. We're here for a revision to a setback overlay, not a rezoning request. This has already been rezoned as a DMU 2 years ago as a means to manage the parking. As a means to manage the parking issue in a downtown redevelopment area. Please note that it passed and the DMU requires a 0-foot setback and no parking. However, during the rezoning process, the 10-foot overlay was placed on the property as a means to protect the residential neighborhoods. This building is a life and fire safety issue at 10 feet. If we ever want to see this building repurposed, the requested 6-foot setback will be necessary to make this historic building a usable adaptive reuse project. Currently, the travel distances cannot be met without the setback, the 6-foot setback. This building will sit empty until the setback is dealt with. As a part of the plan review process, we were advised to go through a residential protection standards waiver last February to make sure the neighbors were comfortable with an amended 6-foot setback. There was no opposition and the waiver was granted. The neighborhood was in support of the project, and the planning department made it clear that the waiver was what was needed to accommodate the 6-foot amendment. 701 and our team were advised to move ahead with further drawings based on guidance from the City of Fargo Planning Department. We went ahead with the drawings, and this client invested a lot of money into design fees, acquiring the building from a previous owner, and securing additional parking options during that time. We submitted complete drawings in July as a part of the plan review process. We were actually notified that we had a permit to pick up after a 2-month plan review process on August 30th, 2019. There was no concern with the zoning paperwork during that review period. A retraction email was actually sent 2 hours later from another department. As it turns out, the RPS waiver didn't take care of the amendment, and we were here a month ago to clean this up. At that meeting, the discussion became about Fargo Brewing and not being a good neighbor, as well as a discussion about parking. The focus was not on the setback overlay or an amendment to this 10-foot requirement. Please note that this is not Fargo Brewing, and this owner is diligently looking at additional parking options. Following that meeting, we reached out to Family Fair's attorney about 701's plans for additional parking, as well as to begin discussions about a shared parking agreement. Please note that before last month's meeting, 701 had reached out to discuss a parking arrangement with no interest from Family Fair to start that discussion. As you can imagine, 701 is surprised to see them here last month after 2 years of being already rezoned as a DMU. All this being said, this is about a setback, and a DMU parking discussion was had 2 years ago. We are here to manage the process in a professional manner, follow the rules of the planning process, and help an owner to put together a great project for Fargo, and not delay them any longer, costing the project more money than the process already has. This project is a great addition to the Roosevelt neighborhood, and the neighborhood's residents feel the same way. Thank you.
Good afternoon. John Krings from Kaler Dowling. I'm the attorney for the developer. I just want to echo a few things from my perspective. In talking about changes to the land development code, from an attorney's point of view and from representing developers, we want predictability. We want consistency, that the same situation is handled in the same way. And we want reliability. We want to know that when a decision is made and we're given instructions to move forward down a path, that we can rely upon what we're told, because time, effort, and a lot of money is expended after that. I know Chris Hawley has talked to, via their attorney Aubrey Zuger, to Family Fair. We've provided all the additional information we can. We have tried to address their concerns. I only heard about an hour and a half, 90 minutes before today's meeting, that Family Fair was not withdrawing their objection to this. But we want you to know that we have really tried to share as much information as possible and to address their concerns as reasonably as possible. With that said, the scope of what's before this committee today is very simple. The conditional overlay has 10 feet in it on the north side. We've already changed the residential protection standard from 10 feet to 6 feet. The right hand has already done what it needs to. Unfortunately, it was part of the conditional overlay too to go from 10 to 6. We are not the one asking for the conditional overlay to be deleted in its entirety. The planning department, through conversations with Nicole Crutchfield, has informed me that it's their choice to get rid of the conditional overlay. So just understand, the only thing 701 is asking for is the right hand that already agreed to change 10 from 6 is just matched from the left hand, from changing that from 10 to 6 feet. If there was ever a time to object to parking, it was 2.5 years ago. The DMU and the conditional overlay have been on the books since May of 17. It's not today. It wasn't a month ago. 701 needs to work with the city to react. So when they knew the DMU was in place, 701 purchased the real estate. Had the DMU not been in place, and they knew parking would have been an issue, they would not have purchased the real estate. The 10-foot setback being changed from 10 to 6 was at the request of planning. The fire inspector wanted to see that change, so 7-1 accommodated that change. They were told that, yes, no problem, we will get the 10 changed to 6, and that was done in February of this year. Then 701 moved forward with the planning process and came up with complete drawings. Those complete drawings were submitted this summer. In response to that, and after the review, a building permit was issued, only to be unissued 2 or 3 hours later. 7-1 came to a meeting a month ago, ready to talk about 10 foot to 6 foot, and got involved in a conversation well beyond the scope of what should be before this commission. That decision was already made 2.5 years ago. It wasn't right. So we are now here again. We are asking just very simply for the right hand that already changed 10 foot to 6 foot be matched by the left hand, changing 10 foot to 6 foot. That's all we're asking for. We do not want to see any more delays in the project. Just by the delay of a month with the horrible weather we're having has cost 701 over $40,000 of out-of-pocket costs for winter work. So we'd like to avoid that if at all possible. We're here to answer any questions the commission has, but again, I emphasize predictability, consistency, reliability, and the scope of what we're here for is to change 10 foot to 6 foot and nothing more. Thank you for your time.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
I have a question for Chris, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for the testimony, and sorry for the hassles you guys have gone through. I think it's gonna be a great project at the end of the day. Just how long have you been involved in the project?
I've been involved for 2.5 years.
So you were around at the 2017 rezoning?
That was a previous owner, and they took care of that hearing kind of on their own. The 10 foot was put on kind of as a late ad to protect the residential, to protect the neighborhood. I think I think it was a number that was maybe kind of pulled out of a hat at that time. And, you know, I mean, I think 10 feet is a typical setback. What's unique about this particular project is it's landlocked on 3 sides. And so in order to make this building compliant with any travel distance requirements between stairs, you need the 6 feet in order to meet that requirement. And so it's kind of it's stuck, this building in particular is stuck between a rock and a hard place. So at some point, this 6 foot number is going to have to be dealt with, whether it's today or a year from now or 2 years from now. So that's.
And I appreciate that, because I think that's good advice, and I appreciate you giving your professional opinion on it. And, you know, I think your lawyer stated that you like predictability too, and I don't think we look good to the public, neither do the applicants, and when we have to come back 2 years later and change something. And so if this could never have been done as we originally approved it, I think that means the system failed everybody a little bit. And so I'm happy you're around to fix that, but I think predictability is good. And so when we have to tell the neighborhood, well, we have to change something that we zoned 2 years ago, we don't like that either. And so I know you guys are looking for predictability, but just for everybody, don't come back and ask us for a change 2 years later because you didn't get it right first. That's a tough decision to make.
Any other questions, commissioners?
I'd just like to make a comment. Is that okay? Yes. It seems that this project has been delayed unnecessarily for another month, ending now, hopefully, and that it was somehow skewed by introducing the parking issue, which really had nothing to do with, as you'd said, the setbacks. So hopefully we'll be able to move forward today.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Anybody else from the public wish to speak?
Good afternoon, members of the commission. My name is Aubrey Zuger. I do represent Spartan Nash. I was here last month to assert their objection. Spartan Nash respectfully requests that the commission deny the zoning change proposal to remove the conditional overlay. It is correct that the parties have, since the last hearing, attempted to have discussions about some way to reach an agreement. Those discussions were not successful. I do want to address, I think, one of the critical issues here, and that's whether or not removing the conditional overlay impacts parking. And Spartan Nash's position is that it does. The reason why is the bigger you make the building, the further they can go to the property lines, the more parking that's required, because the more customers that can attend the restaurant and frequent it. And so the concern from Family Fare is that there's going to be a very small parking lot. Vendors, employees, and customers are all going to frequent this rather large building on a rather small lot, and there'll be inadequate parking. And this will impact Family Fare because there are issues with their parking lot with respect to having access to its loading dock, having customers park there, and having employees park there. So I think that the issues that were identified by Family Fare in its initial written objection are still the same issues we have today. Regretfully, we couldn't address those issues in some type of a resolution. But the position of Family Fare is that if you allow for a larger building by removing the conditional overlay, the problems will be exacerbated. I'm available for any questions.
Questions, commissioners?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else from the public wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. Any additional discussion, commissioners? Any questions for staff or anybody else?
I have one question for Chris. I had heard that that the project involves the purchase of another building that's going to provide more parking. Is that true? To the north of the one that's on the corner?
There have been discussions about that, yep, about expanding the parking, potentially.
Yes, and I heard this from the next door neighbor to the north, and she was really excited about your project. And so that would add how many parking spaces?
We would go from 9 to 24.
Thank you.
And accommodating the residential protection standards as a part of that too. So.
And if I may comment as to that, the adjoining property went through a foreclosure sale this summer. So this is brand new information, which we don't want to change the scope of the project, but we were the successful bidder, and a sheriff's deed has been issued and recorded on the property. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, are we ready to act? Do I have a motion? Don?
I'd like a motion to accept the findings and recommendations of staff.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Schneider?
Aye.
Sherling?
Yes.
Holtz?
Aye.
Stoffren?
Aye.
Morgan?
Aye.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Rosenberg?
Aye.
Tassa?
Aye.
Gunkelman?
Aye. Motion carries. All right, items number 3 and 4 have been continued to December 3rd, to the December 3rd meeting, if anybody was here by chance to speak on those items, but they have been continued for another month. So moving on to item number 5, Timber Parkway 4th edition.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Donald Kress with the Department of Planning and Development. As the Commissioner stated, item 5 is the Timber Parkway 4th edition. Okay, the mouse apparently is not pointing here. So as indicated in the black outlined property there, that is the Timber Parkway 4th edition. It's zone GC, General Commercial. This is a subdivision. There is no zone change proposed. It's just a subdivision. Locationally, again, in the black outlined area, you see is west of the Cashwise down there in 52nd Avenue South near the interstate. That is one large lot at this time. There has been some various history on things that have been proposed for this, and that's evolved over time. But right now, the applicant, here's a look at that from the ground. It's unfortunately a gloomy day last Friday when I took these, but just to see that there's, it's basically like the aerial photo shows, a large open lot. There is some site work there. But to get to the plat just proposes to, zoom this in a little bit here. The plat proposes to divide this area into 7 lots. again, for commercial development. Fairly straightforward. Something a little different here you'll see is that some of the lots are served by, we call them private drives or easements there. That continues a system of easements that was started on the east side of the property. Again, for a commercial development like this, you know, we've worked with developers on this, and they have, when they have projects like this, you might remember we did one in Blue Water Creek a few months ago, and they have covenants that relate to the maintenance of these easements and who's going to take care of them. And then the city also reviews those covenants, and in this case, may also be a party to them. We might have some wording that we would want to insert in there just to guarantee there is always access to it, because they're not dedicated public streets, so we don't have, it's not the same as a public street. But in a commercial situation like this, probably not unreasonable in some situations anyway. These all get very thoroughly evaluated in the development review process. But so again, other than that, a fairly straightforward subdivision there. And back this off to make this work. Oh no, what happened? Okay, hang on here. I'm too far. Let's see here. What happens if I do that? Okay. There you go. The project applicant, Chris Mack of Paces, is with us this afternoon and may wish to address the commission. The staff's recommendation is stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, Commissioners.
Any questions for staff? Anyone? I invite the applicant to speak if he would like to. Any questions for the applicant?
I am Chris Mack with Paces. I guess I don't have any more to say that Donald hasn't already said. I guess if you have questions, you can ask them now.
Is anyone? All right. No questions. I'll open it up to the public. Anyone from the public wish to comment on this? See no public comment. I'll close the public comment. Any additional discussion, or are we ready to act, Commissioner? Mary.
I move to approve recommendation to the city.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Sherling?
Yes.
Morgan?
Aye.
Rosenberg?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
Holtz?
Aye.
Stoffren?
Aye.
Tassa?
Aye.
Gunkelman?
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item number 6, Golden Valley 3rd Edition.
All right, Commissioners, again, continuing just doing this descriptively. Golden Valley 3rd Edition, you may recall the previous additions to Golden Valley 1st, which is in the yellow there, is some years old. Golden Valley 2nd Edition was more recent here, with about the last year, and then this is Golden Valley 3rd Edition. And again, the part that's under consideration for the subdivision is there in the outline black. There's also a zone change. That property is currently zoned agricultural, and the proposed zoning is SR4 for the residences, and then there is one HOA-owned park that is proposed to be zoned to PI, public and institutional, with a conditional overlay that will restrict its use just to being a park. This lot is continuous with a similar lot in the Golden Valley 2nd Edition, so we just made the zoning match. Again, to locate there, the outline property is the subject property. Down to southeast, which is as you face it, the lower right, is Davies High School. And then across to the west is, adjacent to the west is the drain, is Drain 53, and across that is the Selkirk Place 1st Edition, which you Commission approved this summer, which is under development on that side. So we're getting development on both sides of the drain here. Again, a fairly straightforward project. It's basically a large open field there. As you see, the top is a view from 67th, which will connect from the existing 67th across this and to 67th Avenue in the Selkirk Place 1st Edition. And then here we're standing on the 69th Avenue, which is under construction. That's the north side of Golden Valley Second Edition, just looking across the property. Again, just a large open field there. We're looking at the plat there, as you saw. Well, we'll look at the plat first. On the plat here, you see that the area to the west is not included in this plat. It's still an open area. The applicant is doing this in phases, as you probably gathered by the way the several plats. And we did just, we being the city, wanted to just have an idea of what the layout of that west area would be. This is important for the development of utilities and connectivity. The applicant did provide a general master plan, you might say, that give an idea what that's going to look like in the future. You are not voting to approve this master plan. This is just a concept that we have to work with, and we might be working with the applicant a little more to develop this in a little more detail. Commissioners, as you may recall, one of the big discussions with this Golden Valley area was the connectivity of 67th Avenue across the property. In fact, an earlier version of a Golden Valley plat was denied by the City Commission in 2016 because the connectivity was not there. Your staff report includes a rather lengthy discussion of connectivity in this area. It's the same one that was in the Golden Valley Second Edition. It worked so well the first time we brought it back. And but that connectivity is shown here. That discussion in your packet just reinforces the importance of this connectivity. And there is, so eventually this will all connect across the drain. And that's to be determined in how that's going to work in the future time. But at this point, the applicant has platted up to the city's property. There is actually a city lot that runs on the east side of the drain that is a levee. And so that's all he could plat. That's as far as he could go. And so that's just, that's the connectivity that we've been working to get here. And again, it's depicted at this time on this plat. So but we'll keep that idea going until that's completed. We'll make one more point here. Again, my mouse isn't pointing, but if you see the small lot that sticks down on the bottom there, the farthest one down, that is the HOA-owned park. It's continuous with one that's in the Golden Valley Second Edition. At that time, these lots that are owned by HOAs, that's homeowners associations, the city always has a concern that something will happen to those lots. The HOA will fall apart, the maintenance will fall apart somehow. Just in general, about this. Oh, hang on. And we'll just keep rolling here. And so the city has created standard language that we have the applicant include in his thanks. Oh, hey, just like getting a pit stop in the race there. They fixed me while I'm rolling here. Okay. The city's created standard language to put in the applicant's covenants that provide an option for the city of what happens in case something happens to that park or in case the maintenance or the taxes sort of get in disarray. And then we just review the applicant's covenants before it's recorded to make sure that that's in there. And the first time we did this, that worked pretty well. The applicant, again, John Eunice of Eagle Ridge Development, worked together pretty well on that. And those just get recorded with the final plat. So that's nothing your commission takes action on. That's just something we do as part of the final plat process. So again, the recommendation for approval is stated in your staff report. It's shown on the screen. Mr. John Eunice of Eagle Ridge Development is with us this afternoon and may wish to address the commission. That includes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for Donald? I invite John to the podium if necessary. If you have any questions for Mr. Eunice? Anyone?
I do have one question for Donald. The other parks in Golden Valley, they're not HOA, right?
No,
just this one.
Yeah, the big, let's go back here, ma'am. There's the large park. Oh, now I can.
Right.
This here, this park here. Yeah, these are public parks, ma'am. That's correct. It's just not. This is the one that's the. Well, it's showing up on mine, but it's not showing up on the screen. Okay. Yes, so the large park with the detention basin is down to the southwest is a public park. These are just HOA-owned parks that, John, has anybody had a chance to use the HOA park yet in Golden Valley Sec?
Yeah, Commissioners, thank you. John Eunice with Eagle Ridge. The very first edition of Golden Valley dedicated all that was required for parks, but given how far it is from some of these lots, we decided that we wanted to have a private park that would have some amenities that these residents could use. So this is in addition to what was actually required. And to answer Donald's question, the improvements for Golden Valley Second just finished a couple weeks ago, so we have not started construction on the pocket park yet. That'll happen in the spring.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. I open it up to the public for comment. Any comment from the public? See no comment. I close the public comment. Any additional discussion, commissioners? Or are we ready to act?
We'll make a motion to approve as outlined in the staff report.
I have a motion. Is there a second? Brad seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Sherling,
Yes.
Morgan,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Tasa,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Moving on to item number 7. Maggie.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Item number 7 on your agenda is titled Eddies and Fullers Otters Outlets. It's located at 1437 6th Avenue South. The applicant and owners are Jim and Carol Baum, and they are here with us today, and they are requesting a zone change from the SR3 single dwelling residential to the MR1 multi-dwelling residential. The history on the property is as follows. So the city has documentation to show the existing structure on the property was built as a triplex in 1946. At the time of the construction, the triplex was a conforming use in a zoning district that is comparable to the present-day low-density multi-dwelling residential zoning district. If the zone change were approved today, the maximum density allowed on the lot would still only be 3 dwelling units. In 2002, a large-scale rezoning effort was undertaken by the city with the intent of providing the Jefferson and Hawthorne neighborhoods with uniform, single-family zoning districts that support the mission of the Neighborhood Revitalization Initiative. As part of this process, property owners included in the proposed rezonings were notified of the possibility of coming into a legal nonconformity. The subject property was one such property. Today, the zone change is requested in order to bring the existing structure back into conformity with the Land Development Code. The subject property is both legally nonconforming structure and a legally nonconforming use. According to the Land Development Code, a nonconforming use that is residential in nature may be restored, rebuilt, and repaired in its entirety after incurring damage of more than 50% of its structural value prior to the damage, provided the property owner follow the 5 criteria stated in that section. To the benefit of the property owner, the city has the necessary documentation to prove that the existing structure is in fact a legally nonconforming use and can provide this evidence to the property owner upon request. This exception for the residential nonconformity makes the request for the rezone on the subject property unnecessary in our opinion. Under the current SR3 zoning district, if the existing triplex is damaged to the extent of more than 50% of its pre-destruction value and the 5 criteria of section 20-1002D3 are not met, it may only be rebuilt in conformance with the dimensional standards of the SR3 zoning district. This aligns with the intent of the 2002 city rezoning, which was to promote and stabilize the existing single-family character of the Jefferson neighborhood. Staff did receive a petition to retain the current SR3 zoning district, which has been provided for you today as a laydown item. And based on the zoning criteria 1 and 4 of the Land Development Code not being met, staff is recommending denial. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and again, the applicants are also here to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Maggie? Commissioners, Dawn?
It's a little bit confusing to me. I guess I've read it, but it has been a triplex, right?
Correct. It was constructed as a triplex.
Okay, and has it been used for more than being a triplex since then, or how many apartments are there?
It's my understanding that there are 3 units in the building that are currently being used.
Okay, and so then if there is damage to the building over 50% in the future, then it could be reworked, but as it is, it can stay as it is that right?
So the way our legal non-conforming uses works, since this is a residential property, it would be allowed to be rebuilt, even if it incurs more than 50%, as long as it follows 5 criteria of the LDC. That does not, however, allow the use to be enlarged, and it does not allow it to be reworked on the side of the property. So you couldn't move the garage. It would have to be built to the footprint that it exists today.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Maggie? I invite the applicant to speak.
Hello, my name is Jim Baum. My wife Carol is here. I know there was one objection letter that was sent to zoning, and I'd like to address some of the objections to the change. In regards to parking, our building, a triplex, has 3 garages and at least 6 parking spaces. The 3 single-family houses across and to the west enter their garages on 15th Street and the alley. So parking for those single families I would never affect them, but I've got my own parking. To the east from my house, going up to 14th Street South, 6th Avenue, there are 3 duplexes, 1 triplex, which is not mine, 1 fourplex, and 1 eightplex. There are 6 family houses, and there are 6 multiple dwellings. This is on both sides of 6th Avenue up to 14th Street. The intent of the NRI was to provide a uniform single-family district by not being zoned MR1. Our building will only be valued as a duplex. Our future buyer will not be able to get a larger loan for a threeplex if it is zoned as an SR3. From 1924 it was revealed to 2002, that's 78 years. It was zoned and conformed as a triplex. On our taxes, we pay taxes on a threeplex. People's concerned about the change to an MR1 is not really justified because MR1s can't be expanded larger. Investors are not going to tear down a well-maintained and profitable piece of real estate only to build a new duplex or triplex. In our neighborhood, houses are not being torn down and larger apartments are not being built. As stated by the planning comment, point number 3, staff analysis and approval would not, I repeat, it says there right on the form, will not adversely affect the conditions or the values of other properties in this vicinity. The only people negatively affected will be my family. This is our retirement investment and savings. We have a buyer, their loan has been approved, pending a change to MR1. We have always followed the City of Fargo's ordinances We don't remember being notified of the zoning change. Was it sent to our residents, or was it possibly sent to 1437? If we were notified, we probably would not have known the difference between an SR3 and an MR1. We have, just in the last 2 months, figured out the ramifications of the change. Naive or not, we never thought the changing of the city zoning would prevent us from selling our property that we have owned for 39 years. The 2002 change should have considered the type of building and zoned it accordingly. Our zoning should be grandfathered in, 78 years as a triplex. That's all my comments.
Any questions for Jim?
Thanks, Jim, for coming today. Understand your plight trying to sell and getting the bank the verification it needs. I know Maggie mentioned that the city has information that can prove that it's a legal conforming use. Has that been tried with the bank? Do you know if?
I have my realtor here with me, but it's the bank. The banks won't do it. If it's zoned as a duplex, they only want to borrow money for the amount that maybe a well-constructed duplex would be. So there's the catch-22. Legally non-conforming, so far is the buyer's bank does not accept that. So
I'd like to suggest, you try to get whatever documentation the city can give to prove that, no matter how it goes today. I think one concern I have, because I think your property obviously has a long history of what it is, and you've been great owners of it. My concern on our board anyways is your neighbors' houses that aren't multifamily right now. You mentioned several other in the neighborhoods that are.
Could you speak up a little bit? I'm having
problems. Sorry about that. So your neighbors' houses that are single family zoned right now, my worry is a developer will come in and say, look, now their neighbor's lot, you just rezoned that multifamily, and we as a planning board maybe want to keep it single family, but we lose that argument when they all of a sudden one property can be multifamily in the whole block, and then how do you tell the next developer that, no, you can't change that home into multifamily, we only did it for them for some reason? We start to lose our argument, and so that's my concern, trying to look as a broad approach. And so it'd really be nice to find a way to supply the bank with the information it needs, or try another bank, because I know every lending institution requires something different.
I think you're going to run into the same situation with a different bank. It's zoned as a single-family duplex, and I'm selling it as a triplex as it was built. And that's what we want, is just to be zoned as a triplex. Yeah. And as far as this building is concerned, each floor has the lower level has 1,000 square feet, the second floor has 1,200, the third floor has 1,200. So those are nice sized buildings. They've never been converted, walls have never been moved, the garage has never been moved, it's stucco, re-insulated. I don't know if you're gonna find too many buildings in this condition and then have a developer saying, I wanna come in and tear it down and build something larger. It wouldn't be possible. And I don't know how it would be possible for a person to buy, say, 2 or 3 single family and then build a 6-plex. There is already an 8-plex on our avenue. So I just think that, gee, we had it so long and we paid taxes all these years, and I think it should be grandfathered in. I've been a good landlord. I have other properties, not as nice as this. No problems in the city of Fargo. And my realtor, Neil Graff, maybe could answer some questions. Unless you want me to answer some questions, I'll try to answer them also.
Any other questions? Neil, if you'd like to address?
My name is Neil Graff. I'm with Advantage Realtors. Carol and Jim do have a dilemma in that when you look at the tax statement, it says a threeplex. And when our appraiser went out for the bank and appraised it and did the financial analysis on it, he did it as a threeplex. And the zoning is a duplex. I haven't seen that before, or a single-family duplex. I haven't run across that in 45 years of selling real estate in Fargo, Moorhead. I think Jim has a good suggestion. That would be to have it grandfathered in. That would give you an explanation if someone wanted to buy a single family and build a threeplex on it. I don't know how you could let that happen then. The problem we have with the banks is that the underwriter, the people that are locked in a dark room and go over all the paperwork to approve loans, have criteria. And they're all basically the same unless we had a cash buyer. And when you buy income property, you want to leverage yourself. So that, that isn't going to happen. And if Jim were to sell this as a duplex, or have it financed as a duplex, he loses almost a third of the income that the bank would use to qualify the home. I can't add any more to that except
So
that,
is it, Mr. Chairman, is it because the appraisal, it's the appraisally issue, or is it the bank's reviewing process?
it's the bank's reviewing process.
The appraisal estimated it appropriately in terms of value, but the bank wrote it down?
Because it's sold as a threeplex, and it's on a duplex lot.
Understand, I'm just trying to figure out where the, the underwriting process.
Underwriting is black and white. They don't bend at all.
I can quote the bank.
Okay.
I have a question. So, according to the appraisal, then it's diminished in value because it's called a duplex. But, for instance, if an investor came along and they looked at one building or another, there would be a difference. Obviously, they could be very much willing to pay whatever amount they're asking for a duplex. Is that right? But if it were sold, then it wouldn't be able to be operated as a triplex?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question, Don.
Oh, okay. So just because the bank decides that it fits only the criterion of a duplex, if a buyer came along and said, oh, I love this building, I want to buy it regardless of what the bank will loan, I'll take what the bank will loan and finance the rest myself. So if the building is sold, will it have to operate as a duplex?
I still don't understand.
Okay, so it can remain a triplex, even though the bank will only finance it as a duplex?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, to answer the Ms. Morgan's question, it's that conformity, basically you can continue using that as 3 units.
Thank you. So then it appears that it's just more of a funding problem than it is anything else in terms of it being sold. You could list it for whatever you'd want to and sell it for what you please. Isn't that the case? Regardless of what the bank has to say?
Yeah, we do have we have a buyer, and they don't want to buy it as a duplex, and the bank doesn't want to sell it to them as a duplex or finance it as a duplex.
I understand that, but there isn't only one buyer in this world.
Correct, I understand that. But if you're looking for someone with a lot of money down, that just doesn't happen in income property. They want to leverage their way into it. They want to buy 2, 3, 4 rather than 1.
Has the building been listed for some time?
spring?
Yeah, 3 months.
Any other questions for Neil or Jim?
It is sort of like catch-22, we're just stuck. If this does not if it's not changed, like Neil said, we're losing about a third of the value of that building. And it's not that this building is out of line. Drive down that avenue, and I already gave you the duplexes and the fourplexes and so forth. There's as many multi-dwelling buildings as there are single family. And I know there's an overlay on it and it wants to go back to single family, but that's not going to happen for years. It's not going to go back to single family for years. You can try, but mine should be grandfathered in. The next person, the next developer that comes along will not have the grandfather clause. He will not have owned it for as long as we have.
Just to clarify something with staff, maybe I'm asking a question for all of us here. If the owners had complied with the 2002 rezoning or whatever, would this would not be a problem today?
In 2002, this was about 2 months before I arrived to the city, and historically after the land development code was implemented, we did have some neighborhoods that either had sprinkled zoning, or we had some single family neighborhoods that were zone limited industrial. So for several years after that, the staff worked with block by block in some of the older neighborhood, as well as the neighborhood associations, to rezone some of these areas so they were a little bit more contiguous. That process involved contacting a large group of area, stating that there's a staff-initiated rezoning with the intent to downgrade this to what the existing use is in that area. I do know that, and I wasn't involved in too many back then, but I do know the practice was if the neighborhood was, the individual property owners were contacted and they contacted the city and wished to opt out of that zoning change, that we would grant that and remove them from the list. Just because what we were trying to do is, through the work that the community development department did, we were trying to stabilize the neighborhoods in more of the single family nature. At that time, there was a big problem of houses being chopped up from a single family house to, someone splitting it in half and having 2 units. So that was one of the concerns why they initiated that back then.
So from what was presented, again in clarifications, if they would have addressed this issue then, this wouldn't be a problem today?
Correct.
And the city has documentation on how they were contacted, or?
We researched this. It took some time to find this. It was under the Jefferson neighborhood file and not under the platted subdivision file. The property owners were contacted back then, and we do have proof that the letters were sent out and a list of all the people contacted during these different zoning changes. That was one factor that we took into consideration as we tried processing this application.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have a question for the staff. How many other properties are going to have this problem with on these blocks? Do we know? If we have an issue with underwriting and this valuation, obviously it's going to happen again.
Yeah, actually, I would, we've had this discussion on and off for a period of time. I would probably, and maybe staff has done this, but we write letters of zoning confirmation or zoning compliance for banks consistently. I think this particular topic, I think interestingly, there's 2 cases on this agenda that I'm literally passing the staff report right over to Lisa Weiss's team to use as case studies and analysis, this one and the first one that you heard, in terms of kind of unique situations and, you know, how do we accommodate all the needs. So this zoning history process, you know, is accommodating several public comments and public direction we've been receiving over 20 years now, and stemming all the way back from the school closings, kind of discussions back in early 2000. And so, but I think if this is a new banking practice, then we should talk about that. So the core neighborhood plan process and the land development code diagnostics gonna kind of get at this in a much more deeper dive.
So Nicole, are you saying previously you oftentimes have been able to provide banks with what they've needed, but this sounds like something perhaps different than what you've encountered before?
Correct, and maybe I'll defer to Mark.
So financial institutions will request zoning compliance letters, and when we fill those out, we pretty much state this can be rebuilt or that can't be rebuilt based on how it currently stands with existing zoning. Throughout all the properties within the city of Fargo, you know, sometimes structures get built without our knowledge, sometimes they get built into a setback that was never permitted properly. And so this is one of the things that they're a tool for them to figure out how conforming the property is. We write several zoning compliance letters. It's requested quite a bit. It's usually more of a commercial multifamily property request, not very often in single family. However, I know over the years, our non-conforming section of the land development code has evolved quite a bit to be able to encompass this. In fact, there was legislation last year that was copying some of our text word for word to try making it into a state law. Some banks have been okay with that legal non-conforming law. And in essence, if the structure is destroyed beyond 51%, after a certain period of time, if they get a permit, they can reconstruct it as it currently stands by right, because the city acknowledges it. It's the illegal non-conforming structures that were a house that was cut in two, that the city was never aware that there was 2 units. And if that were to be destroyed beyond 51%, then that could not be reconstructed because we were not aware of that existing use. In this situation, obviously we are aware that this is a 3-unit and it could be reconstructed as it currently stands. Did that answer your question?
Well, let me go back to Jim for a second here. So Jim, have you guys requested that non-conforming letter and you've sent that to the bank and had no luck with that?
Sorry, would you speak up?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm having problems hearing you.
No, have you guys already requested, or has someone, the buyer, or you, I guess, requested that non-conforming letter from the city and provided that to this particular,
Legally
bank?
non-conforming?
Yeah.
No, we have not. That I know. But
the bank wants the MR1.
they want MR1, and we have a buyer. I want to retire. I'm 72 years of age. Had the building for 38 years. I mean, if anything, any building was ever grandfathered, I think that this one should be. This means a lot to our retirement. I haven't changed anything. Nothing's changed. Well maintained. Paid taxes for 38 years. I think, like Neil said, that a potential investor doing something else in that neighborhood, you could argue that you're not grandfathered in. These fellows, this family, had the building for 38 years as a triplex. And it was listed all the way back. I talked with, I believe his name is Don Gress. He showed me zoning all the way back to 1924. It's always been a triplex. So I hope you pass this. It means a lot to us. Nothing's going to change in the neighborhood like the statement from the zoning says. It's not going to change the value of anybody. It's not going to change the use to anybody. It's only going to affect us negatively if it's denied. Thank you. Unless you have more questions.
I have a question for Nicole. So were you suggesting with your comments that as this process for the land development code goes forward, that there could be some changes in instances like this? For instance, I know that one of the movements currently is for more density and for potential for grandmother houses, or how that wouldn't work now, but it could work then if those regulations are changed.
Yeah, I think, thank you for the question. I think really the future is unknown as we invest, $200,000 in the land development code diagnostic and another $300,000 in the core neighborhood plan, and look to matching our vision towards our implementation tools. Right now, our implementation tools haven't caught up with our vision. The vision that I'm hearing that we spend so much time at with our public meetings and the controversy that is created, we're really urging you to look at the vision and decide if the zoning changes meet those visions. And so we certainly understand Mr. Baum's situation. It's not, in answer to Mr. Rosenberg's question, we do get these kind of cases from time to time. I would encourage, sometimes a letter from the zoning administrator to the banking industry helps. We've had brown bags with banking industries and financing industries and other lending practices. If this is a new issue in regards to lending, then we can have some of those discussions. But I would kind of direct you or seek your guidance towards the 5 criteria as it relates to the neighborhood vision as a whole. And this is, if you ask me what could prevent some of the Roosevelt issues that we've had to date, it's exactly this type of thing. And so I would also correct the term grandfathering. Grandfathering is not really a term that we use legally. It's, maybe Eric can talk. I don't want to speak on legal terms in front of an attorney, but our nonconformity clauses are just that, to protect Mr. Baum's interests and to protect the rebuilding and the investment in that property is exactly that nonconformity chapter. Grandfathering is, the minute you zone it MR1, you're allowing all uses to the highest and best use under MR1 to be built there. So all they can do is assimilate properties and build whatever is allowed on MR1, or if they could build MR1 today, they could build MR1 today. So you're not looking at what's there today and what could be there. You're looking about what could be there in relation to the zoning district, and immaterial is what's there today. And so I just remind you of the vision and how these criteria is applied.
Okay, Jim, one more comment, then I'm going to open it up to the public.
This is affordable housing. You want affordable housing in the Jefferson neighborhood, Hawthorne neighborhood? This is affordable housing. What she is saying is that what's going to happen in the future? Like I mentioned earlier, nobody's going to tear that building down and build a bigger one. It's just not going to be profitable. They're not going to be able to build larger on an M1 rating. I guess that's it. Unless you have any other questions. I just hope you guys approve this. We've been residents here and married here for 50 years. I think this denial is just really a bad deal. Okay.
All right, I'll open it up to the public for additional comment.
I'm the prospective buyer. I'm Russell Ford Dunker. I live 1 block north of this property. My wife, Colleen, and I walk in the neighborhood often, And we noticed the property near our home was for sale, and we thought it would be a good investment. We made an offer and it was accepted, and we planned to close in September, and then we received a message from the bank. And I'm going to quote the message from the bank. The appraiser said, "In the course of preparing this report, we discovered that the subject threeplex use is an illegal use under the current zoning. We did confirm this with the city to make sure we weren't mistaken. Our report currently will need to reflect the illegal use and would impact the value of the property since maximum 2-unit use is currently allowed by zoning." It seemed odd, but sure enough, even though the property has been a threeplex since it was built in 1946, it is zoned SR3, which allows a single-family home or duplex. Although the city considers this to be okay, as prospective owners, we do not agree with the city, nor does the lender. This peculiar zoning designation is impeding the sale of the property and affecting the value of the property. It appears there may be some misunderstanding in the neighborhood. I hope at least some of the neighbors are here and can understand the reason for this requested zoning change. The petition some of the neighbors signed said, "We as neighborhood citizens would like to retain our SR3 single dwelling status." I totally agree with them. No one is suggesting a change to their zoning status. We're only talking about correcting the zoning for one lot, 1437 6th Avenue South. I'm well aware of the problem we have in the city of Fargo with developers buying up properties in core neighborhoods, demolishing existing homes, and building oversized multi-unit structures. I understand and sympathize with opposition to that kind of zoning change. This case is fundamentally different. I am not a big bad developer. I'm your neighbor. I care about the neighborhood. I'm a member of the Jefferson Neighborhood Association. I've been advocating for the neighborhood for many years. I volunteer to pick up trash in Jefferson Park. I'm a longtime advocate for historic preservation here in Fargo and across North Dakota. If this property is given the proper MR1 zoning, which allows for a threeplex on this lot, we will proceed with the purchase and we will continue the maintenance and rental of the property. We recognize the current owners have done a great job of taking care of the property for decades, and we will do the same. We think the property is an excellent example of how to accomplish a little added density and affordable housing in a neighborhood setting. The design and scale of the building is very appropriate. That's something we liked about it. What will happen if the zoning remains a mismatch? Who knows? Perhaps it will be bought by a slumlord who doesn't care about the zoning, the property, or the neighborhood, who will care only about collecting rents and will let the property run down. This is an all too common scenario. In conclusion, we remind the Commission and the neighbors that 3 housing units have existed on this lot for 73 years. The use has not changed, nor will it change under our ownership. We respectfully suggest you overrule the planning staff recommendation and do the sensible thing. Give this lot the proper zoning for a threeplex, MR1. Now, that was my prepared comments, and I'll just add after the discussion that this isn't just a lending issue. You know, we could make a larger down payment on the house. I mean, we could still purchase it, but why would you want to own a property that's not zoned correctly? If we wanted to The property has a garage that's a 3-stall garage. It was built in 1946 that doesn't necessarily fit cars of today. If we were to go to the city for a permit to make a garage 2 feet bigger in each direction, would we get a permit? Nicole?
I'm sorry, we were brainstorming over here. I missed your comment, Russell.
If we wanted to, if we own the property and we wanted to enlarge the garage by 2 feet, would we get a permit?
I don't know, I can't use hypothetical, but if it met the setbacks for MR1, yes.
We could make something a larger footprint than what was there.
If it met the setbacks, yes.
Okay. And that's a lot of my concern, and maybe I shouldn't be concerned about it, but you know, the way it looked to me, you can't do anything. You can't do anything with. You can't do improvements. You can't do changes because of the zoning.
And maybe what I would suggest, Commission, if obviously we care about all of these residents in these neighborhoods deeply and strive for a good working relationship, and you know, we work with Russell quite a bit on other material. If it makes sense to continue this item so we can kind of work in more detail on the case, we'd be happy to do that.
Can I
Sounds
make
acceptable.
a suggestion? I would really like to see the documentation. I would really like to see you bring the documentation the city's willing to provide to your bank so that we can actually have some confirmation from the financial institution that they're not willing to lend at the
well, let's say
for
that
for a triplex.
Let's say that worked. Let's say the bank agreed to go through this. What about 10 years from now when I want to sell the property? Then what? Why not?
That's the planning commission's problem 10 years from now.
Why not?
Why
not have the zoning match the property?
And I would just.
They had that opportunity. But.
And I would just argue, you know, we all, again, really like these property owners, and this is a unique situation. We can all name a dozen landlords and developers who could buy this in cash and do something in MR1 standards. I mean, you see it all the time. And so that is my concern. You can't look at this on an individual basis. You have to look at these as a policy setting basis. And we, you know, to Ms. Holtz's perspective, we'd be glad to dive in a little deeper and figure out if there's some details. But yes,
all right, we get it.
Yeah.
I have
a motion to continue.
Thank you for the.
I'd like to ask Nicole a question.
Excuse me, I was.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you for the testimony. I think we all understand your plight, and it sounds like your appraisal may be benefited by some information working with the city. So I'm going to make a motion to continue this and give you time to get the documentation from the city that I think will help fix your appraisal and hopefully fix your financial problems as well.
Is there a second?
I'd second, and could I add a comment? Just for clarification, you said that your appraisal came back and it said that it was illegal, and my understanding it's legal. So I don't know if there's some communication problem between what the lender found, and I just think there's just an awful lot of questions, but you know, I think it's our duty to make sure that you can sell your property at the highest and best use that you can, and we shouldn't be a stumbling block for you. But I get what you're saying, Nicole. I just hope that there's something in between that you guys can figure out to make this work.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I just wanted to ask, it's the same question, really. The word that Russell used was illegal, but I think the word that you used was non-conforming. And as far as I understand it, the bank, I mean, if it's illegal, the bank probably wouldn't want to make a loan, but if it's non-conforming, it may fit into, you know, some other history of non-conforming loans. Is that true?
I'm not sure if I'm quite following, but maybe Eric has something.
Yeah, so, yes, the term that is used in the Land Development Code and in zoning in general is, their situation is a legal nonconformity, which sounds inherently contradictory, doesn't it? It's non-conforming, but it's legal, and that's because it was legal 78 years ago or whatever, and we had a change in zoning as a result of the 1998 LDC. This occurred, as I think Mark was saying, throughout. And so, in any event, yeah, it is legal. It does technically not conform. One thing we did in 2002 was to try and create an opportunity with those nonconformities so that if something burned down that was residential in nature, they could rebuild. Because they were running into problems with banks. This is back in 2000, 2001, 2002 as well, in the same manner. So that was the attempt, and it may be a miscommunication or a slight misuse of wording, unfortunately, accidentally or whatever, but, and that may help resolve the issue. You still have your issue, sir, that you still may want to change zoning in the future. I'm not saying it satisfies you, but I'm saying it is possible that that the lending process is twisted a little bit just as a result of some terminology.
And it could be a misunderstanding on their part, the bank's part, in terms of what's legal and what's non-conforming. Because as you said, it is legal.
Right.
Well, if the bank gets an appraisal that says it's illegal, that's what they're gonna go by.
Yeah,
And
but-
if the appraiser gets it wrong on a factual basis, you got a problem. And so I would hope that we'd be able to clear that up.
All right, can I get a roll call vote?
Tossa?
Aye.
Holtz?
Aye.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Rosenberg?
Aye.
Morgan?
Aye.
Stoffren?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
Schirling?
Yes.
Gunkelman?
Aye, motion carries to be continued. All right, moving on to item number 8.
Thank you, Commissioners. Item number 8 on your agenda is the Eagle Valley Edition. It's located at 7455 20th Street South. The applicant is HS Investment and Brookstone Properties, and they are requesting a conditional use permit to allow temporary use of a residential home as a sales and construction office. The purpose of the CUP is to create a showroom for prospective clients to see the selections that can be made for his or her home. While the temporary use permits are not usually reviewed by Planning Commission, the temporary use of a residence as a sales and construction office as a conditional use permit when requested more than 3 years after the date of the approval of the subdivision. So since Eagle Valley Edition was approved in 2015 and it's now 2019, they do need a CUP for that temporary use. These photos just show that, to clarify, when I say sales and construction office, it would be taking place in a structure that is built as a single-family home. So they're not building an office in a neighborhood, they're occupying a house as an office space. The requested CUP does not have an official termination date. However, the condition listed in the staff report outlines the criteria that would lead to a termination of the temporary sales and construction office use on the property. That criteria is that the approved temporary use must be terminated within 90 days of 90% of the lots in the subdivision being sold to persons, firms, or entities other than the permittee, which at this time would be HS Investments and Brookstone Properties. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Also, I believe, yes, there is a representative of Brookstone Properties and HS Investments here if you have questions for them as well.
Any questions for Maggie?
I'd also think it's worth noting that upon approval of this CUP, if it is approved, the applicant may still have to verify with the inspections department to see if there are any additional requirements that must be met to use a single-family house as a showroom.
Seeing no questions, any questions for the applicant? Mary, okay.
Just a question, it looks like the garage, it was built specifically for a showroom, apparently.
When I spoke to the applicant over the phone, they did say that the showroom use would be contained to the garage.
What do they do later? I mean, remodel it back then? Is that, yeah?
Exactly. Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
Jeez. I didn't get a chance to finish. I need to open it up first to the public, and then we'll open up the public for comment.
Good afternoon, Ian Bullis with Eagle Ridge here. I just want to say that as the developer, we are fully in support of this application.
Thank you. All right, any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. We already have a
I will move to approve officially.
move to approve.
I'll keep my second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Stoffren,
Aye.
Tossa,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Rosenberg,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Schirling,
Yes.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. We are adjourned.